It's me, Gail. In this segment of information sharing, I'll be briefly discussing our next subject, which is filing status. Now, let's just take a quick look at the Form 1040 United States Individual Income Tax Return. Directly under that banner, you will find the filing status line. As you can see, there are 5 filing statuses. These 5 filing statuses not only affect the tax liability, but also affect many available tax credits. Tax credits are used to reduce the tax liability, which ultimately affects the amount of refund or the balance due on a tax return. So needless to say, we want to make certain that the correct filing status is used for each taxpayer. Let me say right here, your filing status on the tax return is whatever your marital status was on December the 31st of the tax year. 99% of our VITA taxpayers are calendar year taxpayers, meaning their tax year ends on December the 31st. So whatever the taxpayer's marital status is on December the 31st determines their filing status. Single, married filing jointly, married filing separately, unmarried head of household, and widow or widower with a dependent child. If you would go to publication 4012 to tab B, filing status, page B-8 contains the filing status interview tips, which can assist you and the client taxpayer in making decisions about this subject. Move through the interview tips going step by step. Allow me to provide you with just a few more clues. Single means you were not married on the last day of the tax year. You do not have a spouse who died during the tax year or in the previous 2 tax years. And you do not have a qualifying person who lived with you during the tax year. You are considered single. Moving on to married filing jointly. That means that you were married at the end of the tax year, that is December the 31st, and you and your spouse want to file a tax return together or jointly. No problem. You can file married filing joint even if your spouse died in the current year. Married filing separately closely resembles married filing jointly. However, if the taxpayer and the taxpayer's spouse elects to file separately, no problem. They're entitled to do just that. Unmarried head of household. Now this one is just a little bit tricky. Suppose the taxpayer is married but doesn't file jointly with the spouse because the taxpayer hasn't lived with the spouse during the last 6 months of the calendar year. That means the taxpayer is married filing separately. Hold on. And suppose the taxpayer has a child, a stepchild, a foster child who live with them for more than half the year and whom the taxpayer can claim the dependency exemption, and the taxpayer supports the entire household in excess of 50% for the entire year. In this situation, the taxpayer is entitled to file as unmarried head of household, even though technically the taxpayer is married. Just know that all, not some, of the conditions must be met in order to qualify for the unmarried head of household filing status. This information is found on page B-10 in publication 4012. You will need to clarify the taxpayer's situation before selecting this option in the software. And just know that there can only be one head of household per household. By the way, the software that we're using is TaxSlayer Pro Online. Tab B page B-1 provides screenshots of the Form 1040 tax return with tab information to the right, showing which tabs in 4012, publication 4012, you should be going to for clarification. The pages B-6 and B-7 show screenshots of TaxSlayer Pro Online software, which shows us how to start a return in the software. Study and refer to those pages as often as needed. Okay, so back to where we were. Our final filing status is widow or widower with a dependent child. So quite naturally, the taxpayer's spouse has died, hence the word widow or widower. The question becomes, in what year did the spouse die? If the spouse died in the current tax filing year, say for example 2020, the taxpayer, the surviving spouse, files a joint return with the deceased spouse or a separate return on behalf of the deceased spouse. However, if the taxpayer died in either of the two previous years, let's just say 2018 or 2019, and the taxpayer did not remarry by the end of the current tax filing year, 2020, and the taxpayer was entitled to file jointly with the deceased spouse in the year of death, and the taxpayer paid more than half the cost of keeping up a home for the entire year in which they had a child or a stepchild, not a foster child, who lived in the home with the surviving taxpayer all year, and the taxpayer could claim the dependency exemption for that child, then the taxpayer could use this filing status. There are a few other exceptions, so please read them carefully on page B-9 in the filing status interview tips. Use the decision tree to assist you in walking through the different scenarios. This slide shows the worksheet which the taxpayer can use in helping to make that determination. Typically, this chart is given to the taxpayer so that they can take with them or sit down and try to assess whether or not they have furnished over 50% of the cost of keeping up a household. Publication 4012, tab B, is full of really good information. Be sure to peruse there first if you have any questions regarding the filing status. This also contains TaxSlayer screenshots as well. As I mentioned early on, this is not a full-blown class version and should not be relied upon as such. The webinar should be used as a refresher and directs you to the applicable pages in your handy-dandy resource publication of 4012. My only point is to use your resource guides. Thank you for hanging out with me once again through this refresher on filing status. Remember, you can always come back here to brush up, refresh, or to gain a bit more clarity or understanding or resource direction on this topic. See you again real soon.